Chris, we're here at the front of the Church of St Mary the Virgin, Chalk. How long has this church been here?
Well, the current church, really the earliest part of it is about 1190. That's an internal part of the church, but it's been here since Saxon times. We know there was a church here in the 8th century, and there was probably one for a good deal longer than that.
So more than 1,000 years?
Oh, certainly more than 1,000 years, and particularly on this site because it's a hill. It's the only hill in Chalk, 130 feet above sea level. So not only good for shipping, but also we think an important feature even in pre-Christian times.
Right. So I guess the first church would have been a wooden church, and then over the years it's been added to by each generation.
Yes, that is indeed the usual pattern. And indeed the tower behind us is probably the newest part of the church. That's a mere 15th century.
Okay, so the newest bit about 500 years.
Yeah.
That's lovely. And what about the people who have come? Have there been any famous people here at Chalk?
There are probably so many famous people that we don't even know who they all are, but some of the most famous would include John Constable, the 18th century, early 19th century artist. He came here in 1803, did a nice sketch of the church from the south side. We also had Charles Dickens. Now, Charles Dickens was then living at Gad's Hill. This is from 1857-58 until he died in 1870. And of course, his trips around the countryside, his huge walking expeditions, including Chalk Church. We know that because it is recorded that he would look at the figures that we see above the porch and doff his hat to them. Another very famous visitor at that time would have been General Gordon, who was in charge of the Thames forts at Gravesend fortifications. He would come here on a Sunday, not so much for services, although he was a great Christian, but he would come here for peace and quiet. And then one of my favourites is King Almund of Kent, who was here in the year 787 when King Offa of Mercia met him in order to create a third archbishopric which Mercia could control. But it only lasted as long as Offa's lifetime. As soon as he died, we went back to just being Canterbury and York.
Great. So that's a very long historical perspective, but what about the current situation? Do many people visit this site in the current generation?
I'm glad to say Chalk Church really is the cultural heart of this parish. There is nothing else that rivals it. Every summer we have a fete which attracts hundreds of people. We have a very, very successful bonfire night and fireworks which brings in people that don't normally go to church, not only from Chalk but from the entire area. Many, many other social events are taking place throughout the year. So really Chalk Church is absolutely pulsating. It's not a dead, dusty place frequented only by the incredibly elderly.
I know the bonfire night in November, that must get at least 1,000 people. We can tell that from the ticket sales that we have. And what about the fete in the summer?
Well, even more than that. You know, I would imagine that if we get probably double that number, maybe even more.
Yeah.
And the church and its role in Chalk is about bringing families together and bringing communities together where people get a chance to meet each other in a lovely landscape overlooking the Thames. It really is a great blessing whether you are a believer or not.
Yeah. And from the I know from the church side, the purely church side, although we have say 100 different people come on any one Sunday, through the course of the year, with all the weddings and the funerals and the baptisms that we do, we're looking at another perhaps 1,000 people that would come.
Yeah, well, you're absolutely right, and I think that is such a wonderful thing to hear when you think that churches and pubs are two things that sort of tend to shrivel a bit, but fortunately that is not the case here at Chalk. In fact, far from it. In fact, there's probably more people come to Chalk. Well, we know more people come to Chalk Church now than they did in the Victorian period, even as a proportion of the population, which is extraordinary. Who would have believed that? But that's true.
Great. Thank you, Chris.
Welcome.